Welcome to A Scrap Life, a podcast solely focused on the hustlers, grinders, operators, and business owners who live and breathe the scrap metal industry every day. We are the original recyclers. No suits required, just guts and hard work. Here is your host, Brett Eckhart.
All right, another episode of Scrap Life. I'm sitting down with Matt Venuto, who's over in Duncan, South Carolina. He's with CRC, Scrap Metal Recycling. And a little quick background on why we're sitting down here today. As you guys probably know about me, I got a special kind of spot in my heart for people that are just got a little hustle and a little go get them in them. And I met Matt at Isri down in Nashville, and he approached me and we started talking and goes, "Hey man, I listen to your podcast." We started talking scrap. He was showing me some videos of his roll-offs and the camera systems they have in their roll-offs, the kind of monitor flow and whatnot. And I gave him my information. We connected, and he just stayed on me. He's like, "Hey man, let's talk about doing a podcast, whatever." And as busy as everybody's schedule is, I feel like you're never too busy to connect with other people in your industry and connect with ideas and thought processes and kind of help each other out. So kudos to Matt for for staying on me. And these are the podcasts I love, man. Talking to people about the industry, talking to people about, what I love. So thanks for coming on, Matt.
Yeah, for sure, Brett. You had your entourage there, and I knew that if I was at Isri, one of my things was to talk to you and get on the podcast. Honestly, I think I'm the first person in the South, so I'd like to give that shout out. We hope to interview more of my comrades in the future. I'd definitely like to invite you to come to our Southeast meeting in November for Isri. I think you'd really enjoy that. We could probably get a live podcast going there. A lot of guys in the industry in the South, guys and girls, a lot of true grinders out there. Yeah, I appreciate you putting me on the podcast.
Absolutely,
man. Be persistent, man.
And you know what, man? Persistence wins, and I don't give a shit. If it's whether it's to talk on a podcast, whether it's just in business and life in general. People talk about a little motivational spark here and there, but the real wins are the people that are just the most persistent, the day to day, the just keep picking at something, keep going, keep pushing, and so for me, I love just persistence, right? I mean, you'll figure it out in life if you just keep trying. And trying is so similar to persistence, just the effort every day and trying to get going. So, in regards to the South, we were just talking. I've spent some time in the South, down Atlanta area, but there's so much, opportunity out there. There's so much, industry out there, and so many hustlers out there. So many guys like yourself, and like you said, females like yourself out there that are in this industry, in the scrap metal recycling industry, that are just kind of out there doing it every day. So I am going to make it a point and effort to spend some time kind of digging around out there and trying to get some more podcasts with guys like yourself from the South. So give me a little bit of background on CRC, kind of what you guys are about, maybe a little history of the company.
Yeah, so a little history lesson on CRC. It was started by a gentleman, Ronnie Strange. He's about 82 years old now. He actually comes into work pretty much every day. He actually works more up on the car side. He started in the business, 40, 50 years ago. He sold two of his entities that are actually behind us and across the street to LKQ. His third business is CRC Services. So he enjoys sitting up in front of the computer and buying cars at auction. He's pretty
his original, he cut his teeth on the auto salvage side. If he sold two of his facilities to LKQ, which is, I'm sure most people know, they're probably the largest publicly traded auto salvage or automotive parts recycler, however you want to politically correctly state that, but in the country and in a lot of other countries as well, right?
Yeah, I think what he's told us is that he is one of the original acquired yards, like in the top five, the A&R salvage behind us. And that was probably 20 years ago or something like that.
Okay.
He set out 5 or 6, and then we started about 15, 16 years ago.
Okay.
And we started so the CRC stands for Chuck, Ronnie, and Charlie. He had 2 other partners. His 2 other partners are still around. They have a yard in North Carolina. They end up getting the business up and going. They ended up starting another parts place across the street in this time frame. Obviously, LKQ is still behind them.
Yeah.
That business became wildly successful. They wanted in on that. They got in on that. And CRC's kind of gone from like a small peddler yard to one of the bigger peddler yards in the region. But as they've done that, myself and a few other guys, we work with his grandson, Blake Stanley. And Blake's kind of been like the vision behind CRC, kind of bringing it more into the 21st century with technology and stuff. But they're just, the Stranges and the Stanleys are just really good people to work for. The culture. It's myself, Blake, a guy, Mike Johnson. We've all known each other in the industry for like 10 years.
So that's where I'm going to ask you. So how do you go from, this 3rd generation family business, and how do you come along and get involved with CRC?
So I actually started my career in 10 years. It'll be, I think it's September 4th of this year. 10 year. I started with Triple M Metal in South Carolina, actually not far from here. My scrap father is a guy named Avi Frank. He worked for Metro Alloys in Atlanta. We were just talking about, he works for SA Recycling now. Him and his father, Sheldon Frank, they ran kind of the Americas, Canadian-based business. Things happened in the business. He kind of moved on. I kind of controlled and worked with Triple M's industrial business in the Southeast. So a lot of big automotive accounts.
Okay.
I was very lucky to meet a lot of good people along the way. There's a lot of yards we worked with that met a lot of good people. There's a lot of good people at Triple M that I still keep in touch with.
Are you second generation then? Are you second generation? You said your scrap father, or was that just
no, he's the guy. He's the guy that brought me into the industry.
Okay, he's like a mentor.
Yes, yeah. You're either born into this life, Brett, or you come in through another thing. So he's like
100%. Yeah,
he's not scrap father, if that makes sense.
And some of the biggest contributors, in our business, because obviously we're not in a necessarily humongous industrial type area, right? So pretty much everybody in our business, or a lot of our key players, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2, has all been people that didn't have any scrap background, right? And I kind of recruited them into the industry versus I think kind of like in your area, we were talking about your population, and because there is so much industry, there is so many facilities and scrap yards and, multi-generations, of recycling facilities over there. I mean, I could see where, you've got, people that they're 3rd or 2nd, 4th, whatever that is, generation, kind of moving in between companies and kind of helping each one of them grow in their own right, So it's always interesting to talk to people that didn't know anything about the industry. Somebody kind of baited them in, and then stuck the hook. And once you're on, man, it's
I grew up in Myrtle Beach. I went to Clemson University. I went back. I worked in hospitality. So, the service side, the people side, and solving problems was what I did with very limited resources. So then when they told me I was going to work in metal recycling and it was going to be like junk metal and whatever, I remember telling him in the interview with his father in the second interview, I said, look, the people are going to be easy, the scrap's going to be hard. And they were just like, what? We got to hire this guy. He's the game changer we need to help go to the next level, because a lot of traditional scrap yards, family-owned business, people know the scrap. I mean, it's in their blood, right?
Yeah.
Dealing with the people, they're like, oh God, you know, they don't know what they're doing at that plant. They don't know what's going on. Like they're either going to hire somebody or they're going to learn to deal with people. You don't have a choice. You know, you're in a service-based business, right?
Well, when you talk to people, you know, like they're like, what do you love most about the industry, right? And, you know, some people, I mean, some people like run equipment, some people like that. But I mean, primarily, like when I talk to people and I interview them or just shoot the shit with them, I'm like, what do you like the most about our industry? Like the people, man. Like because there's so many personalities, right? I mean, I mean, from the guy that wears the greasy jeans to work that's got more money than you can shake a stick at, to the guy that's got the sport coat and the fucking slick back hair and all the jewelry. And it spans it spans the full gamut, right? The full rainbow, I like to say, right? You know, you get all colors, all ethnicities, all, you know, personalities. And it's just an overall fun industry if you understand the people, right? And you understand kind of everybody's got their own way of doing stuff.
I think too, like, you know, you talk a lot on your podcast about the younger generations. And, you know, I think for me, the biggest thing is asking a lot of questions, keeping in touch with a lot of people, you know, get yourself a mentor, whether it's Brett Eckert or it's, you know, for me, it's Chuck Miller, or David Davis, Tennessee Metals, and calling them up and just shooting the shit with them, learning about their business, taking an interest in their business is a big thing. There's a lot of people out there that have a lot of stories, and you know, I don't know as many people like in the Northeast or even on the West Coast, but I'd like to, you know, get to know them. I think the history is super important. I think, like I said, finding mentors, even people that are, I have people that are my peers that we bounce ideas off each other. But going back to CRC, you know, it's a group of us. There's 5 or 6 of us. One guy's a little bit younger. He's like 25, but most of us are 35 and 40. Half of us have worked at other businesses. So half of us have worked at bigger businesses, you know, the triple M's, the commercial metals. So we have a lot of experience. And honestly, somebody said, what do you do for work? And I was like, well, you know, I have a networking event I go to, and I go, we make big things small, and we send them to steel mills. And they laughed. I was like, I was explaining, I was in the taxi cab, one of the taxi cabs at ISRI going to the event, and there was some older ladies in there and said, what are you doing? And I was talking about sustainability and recycling. And somebody said, you're doing God's work. And I was like, yeah, I think that's right. I would say that's right too.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's where going back to that point, I think that's where, and you know, kudos to guys like, you know, John Sacco, who are trying to change the narrative of, you know, just the old school scrap yard, junk yard, you know, and trying to really explain in layman's terms to people what we do, right? I have, in my mind, like, the scrap is the roots of what we do, right? And I never ever want to discount like the scrap mentality, the guys that just found a way to reuse and turn what one would perceive as trash into some sort of value, right? So I have a hard time, you know, just taking the word scrap out of the vocabulary, because, you know, it's like almost someone trying to do away with your last name or with your roots, right? But the reality of it is, like, you need both. Like, and it's just like you talk to your friends in a certain way, and you talk to your grandparents in a certain way, right? So when you're trying to describe what you do, and if you're talking to an older lady and she's trying to understand you, then you go into the sustainability, the recycling, you know, doing, you know, God's work in her terms, right? And when you're talking to your friends, man, like this podcast, it's scrap, man. Let's talk fucking scrap. You know, like, we're talking about, you know, the grittiness, the grind of the industry versus, you know, what I'm trying to explain to the banker, why I need, $5 million to buy this piece of equipment. I'm talking about sustainability. I'm talking about recycling. I'm talking about,
Yes.
commodities. I'm talking about recycled goods that I'm turning into cash generating, business. So
Right.
I feel like it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be
No.
both.
No.
This
I
is an
think
and world, not an or, if you want to be successful. And I think you need both. You need to have the ability to be flexible in your conversation. So
100%. I agree with you. I think there needs to be a balance in what's going on. I think that we can do both. I think it's a know your audience kind of deal. If it's me and you on this podcast, it's scrap. If it's
yeah,
myself and Mark Frederickson, president of SCRA in Columbia, talking to lawmakers, it's recycled material. And I think over time, we can't discount, like you said, the history. Back in the day, the guys rolling around with the horse and buggy, it was scrap. These were
yeah,
jobs that you couldn't get because you were, let's say you were Jewish or you were Italian or you were Indian. You were working in the waste management business. You weren't going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Those jobs weren't for you. They weren't even available to you, right?
yeah. 100%. And that's why I don't want anybody to think, even for me, that I discount, what the language and the verbiage is about, right? And I think that's important for people to understand. Like I'm just a naturally, like, I like to poke fun at shit, right? That's just the way I just like to do it. I like to, half the time I think I'm funnier than I probably am, but it's more just to kind of give everybody a little bit of a, laugh every once in a while. But it is a serious concept, right? And it is words, the wording, the verbiage you use around what you do for a living is important, but it's an audience deal.
Yes.
So I'm glad that you kind of touched on that you kind of, kind of went through that. And I
Look,
think it's important.
I was sitting at the ISRI meeting in Mobile last year when Cheryl Coleman came down, the VP of Sustainability, and they basically said, they just dropped it in our lap like, hey, the world's changing, sorry. And the message was delivered like a sack of rocks. So, a lot of us, we have scrap in our name, you have scrap in your name, your podcast is
Scrap
has
life.
scrap in it. Yep.
Yeah.
It's still the Institute of Scrap Recycling.
Yeah.
Right?
If they're gonna change, I think that's coming, man. I think
it's everywhere, right, Brett?
yeah.
Like we've been doing this for so long, hundreds of years, man. You can't just drop the book of new definitions on people, especially when it's in their name. I mean, some of these guys I know are fourth and fifth generation.
Yeah.
If you said it's like, all right, your last name's Venuto, now it's going to be Smith because that.
Because it sounds
we
better.
don't want to deal with Italians anymore. Yeah, we don't want to deal with this. You know what? You're Sicilian and you guys are tied to the mafia. Your last name needs to be Smith, right? Like, come on.
And I'm glad we're having this discussion because I want it out there. I want it out there for everybody to kind of understand the nuances of it. It's not or, it's not recycled or scrap. It's both. It depends. I mean, it's like the good. To me, it's part of like being in the club, man. Like you're in the club, and part of the club. I always think about it like, let's say the Hell's Angel Motorcycle Club. If Hell's Angel Motorcycle Club, they get a bad rap because there's a lot of stuff that and maybe it's a bad analogy, but it is what it is. Because for a long time, they took shortcuts and they didn't do things the right way and whatever else, they're criminals. But there's also they do a lot of good, and there are industries out there that we do so much good that it maybe gets overshadowed by, second generation operators or whatever, people that, didn't really know how to present themselves as the real value they brought to the table. And so I think, as an industry, maybe we're going from the Hells Angels to more of an established, cleaner cut, motorcycle club but we're still a motorcycle club, you know, like we still
Yeah,
get on our
yeah,
bikes, we
yeah.
still ride, we still, you know, but we do a lot of charity work. We do a lot of work for our city, our
Yeah, I would
county.
say we're like,
You know?
I would say we're more like the Shriners, because the Hells Angels can get into some really.
Yeah, that's
I would say
true.
we're more like the Shriners, where we're doing a lot of charity work, but then we're also still partying down at the
Yeah,
events.
okay, yeah, that's a better. I
Yeah,
like that
yep,
analogy.
yep,
So we're the Shriners Club. We still we
yep.
ride our motorcycles. We got our hats,
You guys
right?
get down pretty
But
hard in
we
Idaho, apparently, man.
yeah, but we have a good time, you know.
Yes,
We
yep,
enjoy each other's company, and we were doing it for the right reasons.
yes, yes, yep, yep.
So CRC, you know, one of the things that intrigued me is you know, the technology of our business. You kind of brought this to my attention at Isri, and you were showing me that in your roll-off boxes, you guys have, you know, cameras so you can monitor as they fill up, right?
Yep.
And one of the coolest things when I go to Israel convention, or here in September, we're gonna go to the Scrap Expo to see the equipment. We get to touch it, feel it, operate it, which is the real differentiator between the expo and Israel, where you just get to look at it all polished up, right?
Yep.
But I love just because I'm an equipment junkie, I'm a technology junkie, and as far as like what's out there for the industry, I'm not a super tech savvy guy, but I'm always looking to see what the next thing in the industry is. And you were showing me on your phone, you're like, dude, check this out. And you were showing me videos of all, you know, a lot of your roll-off boxes and kind of what level they were at. So what kind of got you guys going down that path? What was the kind of spark that you guys said, hey, this is something we need to kind of deploy with our customers or internally?
Yeah, so we don't have a one thing is we don't have a dispatcher sitting at a desk. We have a yard manager in a dual role that is communicated through another technology we use called Slack. You know, so we have different channels set up to
Mm-hmm.
communicate with the yard. Blake and his grandfather are big on hiring people that are very professional. This is the job we need to do. But also in that same sense, like I said, the culture is very important here. I mean, when they wrote me a letter, it said, "Hey, we want you to work here. We only want you to work from 8 to 5, and after 5, unless it's an emergency, we're not going to contact you, and we don't want you to work." So
Yeah.
I think that's very important, finding that balance, whatever it might be. You know, if you're selling non-ferrous, it might be a little different because you're talking to people overseas, right? Um, so he's communicating through Slack, an internal messaging system, and there's a lot of different channels. We won't get into all those, but if somebody wants to call and ask about it, no problem.
Yeah.
Um, Compology, one thing is he can use Compology to we can see how much is being loaded in the containers. We can anticipate kind of certain scenarios with when we need to service people. You know, we guarantee a certain window to our customers that we're going to service you in 48 hours, which is big, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
some customers we don't sign up because we know that we can't provide these service agreements to. So not everybody's going to be a good fit for CRC and like anybody's business. So we can kind of anticipate loads. The other thing was, I think we were putting roll-offs out. We didn't have a great tracking system. You know, I don't think Excel is that great. So I think we were losing roll-offs.
Yeah.
So now we can't lose roll-offs as long as that camera and tracking system is on there. So you can actually get on, you can click street map, you can click satellite, you can see your container at the customer. When you put a customer in, you build like a geofence around it. So anytime that
Mm-hmm.
container is dropped in that area, it automatically assigns to that customer. Sometimes we have a few customers right beside each other. It'll
Yeah.
it'll cross each other, but you know the customers after looking at the material who they are.
Yeah.
Um,
What is it like? What is on a just a rough estimate? What's that on a cost per roll off basis look like?
oh man, that's a good question. I don't. So it's like maybe, and I think everybody's different. Maybe it's $100 a camera, 150 a camera, and then you got to pay the service, which is like $10 a month, $7 a month. I don't know the exact numbers.
Yeah, but I just
everybody's
trying to rough it out for, say, somebody that has got 100 boxes, right, or
yeah,
500 boxes.
Yeah.
But also, I'm just in my own mind, right? It's there is something about the customer service aspect of it, right? Because in the name, it's even in my short tenure, right? From, say, I started about 20 years ago. I mean, this next year will be 20 years since I've been working full time, other than just growing up in it. And in 20 years' time, it has become. I was having this conversation with one of the banks or something the other day, and they were talking about kind of our business flow and structure. And I was like, we used to be 75% scale traffic, maybe 25%, bins, roll-offs, trailers. Our business in that 20 years has 100% flopped, right? To where we are primarily a bin, roll-off, trailer, outside, mobile baling, mobile crushing, outside. We're a service-based company. And I think it's not just us. The people that have had success in our industry they've realized that that the industry has become a more service-based industry, where unless you're in a very, high traffic location, city, like in a metropolitan area, the way you're going to be able to compete is bins, roll-offs, so it's going to become service. So how do you make the customer service experience exponentially better? Well, it's cameras in your roll-offs so that they don't have to call in and say it's ready to flop, right? It's knowing, so they don't it doesn't overflow and create them an issue on their end, right? And you guys have found a kind of a unique way to create that customer experience. To me, when I look at it, that's what I look at. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, you're trying to make the customer experience even better.
Yeah, so they can actually opt into an email or text. It has a volume sensor on it. Obviously, if they loaded the front of the box, it would not work. But most people load scrap kind of in the middle of the box. So there's a volume sensor. It can read, 10, 30. And when it gets to 80%, it'll start notifying you basically every 3 days until you commit or don't commit to servicing the box. And it's an automatic deal, right?
Yeah.
And it gives them big time peace of mind that somebody is kind of like a big brother is watching their material. To our knowledge, we're the only company in the upstate of South Carolina, waste or metals, that have this technology out there.
Well, and also, from a safety standpoint, I could see how it would prevent, because we've got some boxes that we have to drop 20 yarders or they'll overload it, right? I mean, because it's all, in beam cuts, plate cuts. I mean, it's heavy material. And if we don't drop a 20 and we don't pick it up right when we're supposed to, that thing will be overloaded. And because the guy tipping it, the bins, rotating the bins, it's on the production floor, the manufacturing floor, he doesn't care what that box weighs. He's just trying to keep his area clean, get his job done, right? And then when our driver goes to pick it up and he can barely pull that thing on the truck, all of a sudden you're like, man. So from a safety regulatory standpoint, it doesn't take many of those overloaded containers to actually pay for the technology, right, to monitor the flow. And all of a sudden, like, your money ahead and customer service ahead.
Yeah, we also can see if people, if we have a theft problem, we can notify the customer, look, here's the picture, because it's taking a picture every 4 hours, and it's taking pictures at night, and it can take pictures in a sealed container. Now, it's like black and white when it takes a picture, but still, we have some containers that have lids on them with turnings and that are sealed with fluid. We can see all that. It's not, it doesn't work great inside a building, but when they open the roll-off door, sometimes we get a shot of what's going on.
Yeah.
Because it needs satellite access, right? So inside a building's not good. But yeah, I think getting back to the customer service, I think that works. I think, we can communicate with our customers monthly. through an email. I think too, if my role here at CRC is business development, getting our name out, trying to get new industrial accounts, right? Commercial accounts. I think too, if you're a buyer, you need to separate yourself from just price, right? And people talk about relationships and what's that look like? Well, it can't look like Matt Venuto or Brett Eckert paid me X amount of ton 1 month and paid me 50% less 6 months from now. It has to be Matt Venuto and Brett Eckert are good guys. I know them personally. They send us market updates. They communicate with us. I see Brett on LinkedIn. I know exactly what he's doing with his business. Matt's communicating. He's coming by to see us. You got a personal touch, right? If you
100%.
don't have that, and if you're just the man coming in there with the price, it's not the same.
Well, you're easier. If you're just a price guy, you're easy to replace. That's all you are, right?
Yep.
I had this conversation. We do our production meetings every Tuesday, and that's usually when I do like my truck talk, where I'm like driving to my office and I just kind of running through my day in my mind, or kind of what's sticking out and what's kind of burning up my brain that morning. And I had the conversation with our guys in the production meeting, and we have like one guy from every division. Our guy that runs our local dispatch, one guy runs our ferris yard, the other guy runs our over the road trucks. And we get everybody together once a week. We sit in that meeting, and it costs us money to have that meeting, right? Because that's an hour of everybody's time that you have to get it together and go through. I mean, our HR, guys runs our insurances in there. So we talk through stuff, and we just everybody gets their chance, right? Bring it up. Let's discuss it. Let's hammer it out. A lot of bright minds that look at things from very different angles, and it helps us kind of work through issues, problems, or opportunities. And I had the conversation. Everybody said, "Here's the deal: price is going down. This is the math, right? Down 30 on the coast, 50 Midwest, 60 South, 50 South. Just depends on where you're at." I said, "But the market's off." And I said, "I don't anticipate July to be any better, but everybody's selling to the same market, to the same price, and everybody's going to pay within a certain amount of the same price. The only differentiator that we have is our customer service and our quality of service, because the market's the market. We're all selling to the same people. It doesn't matter, right? So we pick up efficiencies in the yard, which means we're more efficient how we handle material. We're more efficient how we bring it in. We're more efficient where we dump, so we don't handle it twice. And the key component is we are better at customer service than anybody else. Go over and above and give value right now, because the pricing's coming down. And as soon as the pricing comes down and they see the price come down, then they're going to look around and they're going to look for other options, thinking that maybe you're just dropping their price because you need more margin, right? So when the price comes down is when your service level has to come up.
Yes.
You have to give more service, more valuable service than you were when the price was up. Because the price is up, everybody's making money. They don't look as hard at the cost, at the value or that they're receiving, right?
I think too, if you're a bigger company or a public company, when price comes down, service comes down, and that is the death of those guys when they have that problem. We'll take, for example, George Adams said, "Never underestimate the small scrap dealer." And I think a lot of people are looking at the industry and they're like, they see all this consolidation. But I'm telling you right now, like he said, never underestimate the small guy. The small guy will always have a service mechanism in this industry, right? Always. Yeah. And it might be in Demopolis, Alabama. It might be in Duncan, South Carolina. It might be in, you guys, Boise, Ohio, Idaho.
Yeah.
It might be in Northern California. But there's always going to be service-based, I think, too. We've diversified our business into cardboard and into the waste industry. So as the metals are starting to get more soft here in the future, I heard you talking on one of the podcasts, we're probably heading into a little bit of a recession. I think it'll be segmented. Businesses have to diversify themselves. I don't know what it looks for other people, but I think unless you're really big in industrial business, diversification is going to be the key for a lot of these smaller outfits.
And the bigger outfits too,
As
because
well,
what's
yeah.
going to happen is, I mean, and I've seen it, I've watched it, went through a couple of these cycles, and what will happen is the bigger outfits, they'll start cutting heads, right? I mean, they'll start
Yes.
cutting fat pretty quick, which is what then, then they'll get to a fairly lean point, which is probably where they should have been in the first place, but pricing allows you to kind of, keep
Yep.
the fat around. And then when you get to that lean point, and they're fairly sound operators, and if the market keeps coming down, they will cut to the bone. They'll get rid of muscle, they'll get rid of everything, they'll cut to the bone, which is when their service drops. If you have
Yes.
the bandwidth, if you've got the longevity, if you've invested back in your business and you've invested back into your people, you will allow yourself the ability to maintain that level of service, that level of communication with your customer, that will then allow you the opportunity to grow your business in a down market, because you can compete with service. You
Yes.
can't compete with price.
No.
You can for a short period of time until somebody comes in and offers a bigger price. So you can then compete with your service, and you will grow your business. Believe it or not, and I've only because I've done it through 2 or 3 of these cycles, I've grown when the market gets shitty. But it's only because I was willing to commit to the service side. And
Yes. Yep.
and then when the price comes back up, as long as you maintain that level of service and you've chased the price back up with your customer, you have a really good chance,
Oh yeah. I think too, the industrial business is, it's becoming more tough. It's I think for everybody to say, hey, we're gonna hit base hits on every deal, like, there's gonna be some give and take in that business. It's very challenging where we are in particular on the very larger accounts. The mills are bidding against you in the room.
Yeah.
It's a very competitive network when you're talking about things like that. It's extremely hard. We got mills sitting on top of us. We got more mills being built as we speak. CRC doesn't participate in really any of that stuff in particular, which is good for us. It's such a dog eat dog world, but you have to, if we're not talking about big accounts and we're talking about service-based businesses, one of my best friends in Myrtle Beach, he works in insurance, and he works for an independent insurance agent. A friend of ours owns the business, and he doesn't talk about price. He talks about service and what they can provide to the customer, right? Because insurance, real estate, I mean, we could talk about all kinds of industries, Brett.
Yeah.
Price, if you're leading with price, you might get a customer, but you're not going to maintain it. You're going to be just another dude, man.
Yeah, you gotta bring some other sort of value mechanism to the table. And whether that's a personal relationship, whether that's a customer service, whether that's a combination of, a few different things with a consistent price, and I say consistent in the fact of not the highest, right? Not the lowest, but you're just going to be consistent with the market, you're going to move with the market, but the level of service, the level of value you're going to bring is going to be over and above. And here's the deal. I always say, you're not going to compete with the mills on prime scrap when they got a mill there and then they got 2 scrap yards, 2, big recycling facilities around that can drop boxes, that have endless access to roll-offs and trailers and whatever else. And you're not going to compete with them on price, right? Because they're just going to look at it as an input cost, and off they go.
Straight pass through. Yep.
And
so
like
the oil companies, straight pass through the pump, baby. Right.
Yep. And in those scenarios, is that business you really want? And I think you have to really try and gauge that and say, is that business that I'm actually going to generate enough revenue on to cover the cost of the box, to cover the cost of the driver, to cover the cost of the truck, and then you start going through all that, and then you start trying to figure out what your margins need to be. Are those assets better deployed to another account, to another, commodity grade, to another, and you could really start trying to analyze your business and say, okay, Where is my, sweet spot going to be? What's my niche? And I think that you've got to figure out what your niche is, figure out a little bit of diversification off those niches so you can kind of weather some of these market changes and focus on that. Focus on providing value.
I think too, if you're getting into that, let's say we service a national account for somebody, something I learned a few years back from an owner was, look, we're gonna interview you, and you're gonna interview us, and we're gonna see if it's a good fit. The good thing about CRC is that, like I said, we have some guys that have worked at bigger companies. We're gonna tell you straight up, one, if we can provide the service, and two, if we're gonna do the business for you. And I think that is a big thing too. Smaller companies sometimes will bite off more than they can chew. You're rarely going to find us in that situation. Not to say that we're not going to be aggressive on certain accounts, because there are going to be those accounts that we want that we're going to be aggressive on. But these big bushling accounts, or even I don't know, monster plate accounts, like really big. We're not gonna stretch ourselves out so far that we can't service our current customer base either.
That's the key, right? That's the key right there that you just said.
Yep.
Is I've watched people do this too many times, chase that top line revenue, and then hurt their business overall because they went after that big account, and let's say they landed it because they had a great price or they had a great sales, pitch or whatever the case may be. But at the same time, you then put all your effort and resources into servicing this account that honestly could give two shits whether it's you, whether it's a blue box, a red box, a pink box. They don't care. They just want it serviced and they want paid, right?
Yep.
Then you sacrifice your other maybe smaller business, your smaller accounts, your smaller contributors, and you basically sacrifice the service. What really got you to the point that you're at in the first place, you sacrifice service with them. And that's really your base. And if you sacrifice the service with your base to chase, to chase the big guy, more often than not, I've seen it, really be detrimental to the business as a whole.
I think too, people got to think, you can't think so much micro, like, hey, how many accounts we're going to get this month? How many we're going to get this year? The industrial business is so cyclical, up and down. You got to think, 5-10 years from now, what are we going to look like? And it's a long, there's a lot of owners out there that expect results. These things are long dealing deals, that could take years to land, to even get bids on. I think the guys here totally understand the long game. They totally understand that not every ball we're going to hit is even going to get us a run or get us to first base. They understand that not every venture is going to be a winner for us. We kind of understand who we are. Like I said, you interview us, we interview you. If it's a good match, on these bigger accounts, then let's do it. Let's try it, and we're not afraid to compete in this arena. Even the local guys are very competitive, but even with that said, if we pivot to something else, something important to me is serving our association. So as much as we compete with these guys in the local area, we also can sit down and, the South's a little bit different. So we have ISRI Southeast is our association chapter, right? We have 7 states. Well, 7.
Is that what they call, like, that's the Gulf Coast? Or is that different?
The Gulf is different. We're the Southeast.
Okay.
We're like Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and Virginia. So in the 7 states, we also have 7 state associations, right? So what happened back in the day, I think during the catalytic converter stuff, ISRI was controlling the money in the Southeast, and there were so many issues we were having. It was very segmented, so we had to start state associations kind of around that 08 area. A guy named Barry Wolf, who's at Charleston Steel. He would be a great podcast guy.
Okay.
He was the first president of the South Carolina Recyclers Association. And actually, the guy that works here, Blake Stanley, he's been a president. I'm on the board now. One of my big things now is, one, to try to recruit new members. both for the SCRA and for ISRI Southeast. If you recruit new members to ISRI Southeast, then obviously they have to join the National Association as well. So that's a harder ask at times for more money, depending on who they are. But we have had some success there. If you talk to anybody at ISRI National, they will tell you that the Southeast is run really well. And we share a lot of ideas with National about, how to run the organization and whatnot. We are the biggest chapter. I think we're 285. We're getting close to 300 members. Like I said, Brett, we'll see you in Savannah in November. Hopefully.
Yeah, man, send me the invite. We'll have to figure it out. Let's figure out a way to make it happen. I'm in.
But I think too, with like the younger generation, you kind of have to find your niche. I found my niche in, I'm a sales guy, right? So I'm out there talking to people and we're recruiting members. But not only recruiting members, like, our associations don't survive, and people need to know this, without our vendors, right? The guys that sell us the cranes, the ladies that sell us the balers, Sierra, Jessica, everybody knows her. Not only do they sell us equipment, they also serve in leadership positions, both in the SCRA and other state associations, as well as ISRI. So that's a big thing, I think our vendors are owed a shout out on this podcast. I'd like to thank all of them. Even people that aren't vendors that might be listening, joining ISRI, I think, is a big deal. I think they can gain a lot of value in it. And you'll know going to the meetings, the guys that are consistently at the meetings are making a lot of the big sales. I'm sure, I know that when CRC is pitched, Blake and Mike Johnson, their pitch, first thing Blake asks is, are you an ISRI member? And are you an SCRA member if they're, in the state, right? Because they want to know. There's a lot of ISRI members that will ask you that question.
And ask you, like, as a fellow recycler, a fellow operator, is that what you're saying? Is that where you're going with that?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's a big deal. I think people that support our industry should get a, extra vote of confidence, right?
It's like anything, right?
They come to the meetings and join it, in our sponsors, right? Like we're sending sponsorship out right now for the SCRA meeting, which is going to be in Charleston, South Carolina. I think that's a big deal. I think it's a good time to promote.
I think it's networking, right? It's, you're protecting your industry. You're talking about your industry. You're promoting your industry in a positive manner. It's networking. It's a lot of that. I mean, I think that's the, I'm not as much of a, and I'm just be real frank, because I'm not a bullshitter, but I'm not as big on, saying that ISRI is a requirement for me to do business with you, right? Because I believe that it's networking, it's building a positive network, but I do believe that ISRI does positive things for our industry. And I think that's a big part of it. I think, like what you're saying for me, it's not a requirement. I want to deal with I want to deal with the person. I want to deal with the company. I want to be, I want to know who I'm dealing with. Obviously, if you're willing to spend the money to be part of a trade association, you do feel strongly about the value. You do feel strongly about, what the industry does for you, for your company, and whatnot. My big pushback on it, say even a national level, is it does it bring you all the value? Do you get the value that you're paying for? And if some people will say, I get over and above, and it's probably the people that commit to the meetings, that commit to the networking, that commit to the lobbying, that commit to that, right? And so I'm like, you got to kind of pick a lane, like, go on and do it, and kudos to you. And if not, if you feel like your time is better spent on building your business, I understand that too, right? I think it's an and, goes back to like kind of being an and business.
Sure.
But you're 1000% right. Like they are doing great things, and they are helping our industry, and they are pushing it forward. And when you sign up to go to the Israel National, you pay that money, you think that you'd like to believe that that money's going towards promoting the industry in a positive light. So
look at you. So you went to the national meeting that was held in the South, and your opinion. Let's hear your opinion on it. What did you think of the meeting?
I think that it should be held somewhere new every year.
Yep.
I like the
Yep.
South. I mean, like I said, I spent a lot of time down there going to Atlanta and whatnot, like we were talking about ahead of the podcast. I thought the Nashville venue was great because it gave people in the South access to what at least easier access to a convention versus trying to fly and get into Vegas or California or whatever. That's just, that's a lot tougher. That's the same reason why I love the Scrap Expo. Like the Scrap Expo that's coming up in September, that's down in Louisville. I mean, that's awesome. It's different than the ISRI convention. It's more set up for the small, medium-sized operators, and it was a needed twist for our industry, right? Because if national convention is a way to connect with, some of the larger consumers, and you're going to get, like 40, 50 countries where individuals coming in that are consuming your material on an export basis, plus your domestic big steel mill consumers. If we had a convention every year that was set up and really designed around the small and medium-sized operators for us to connect, right? Guys like yourself, myself, that we could connect and say, what are you guys doing over there? It's different. How do you guys do this? How does your marketing look? How does your customer service look when you do this? What equipment are you using to process scrap to get it ready for the mill? Like all those things, that is why I guess I got a lot more love for the Scrap Expo. I'll attend the ISRI stuff. Like I can appreciate what they're doing, but because I am just a kind of a small piece of the puzzle, right? I want to connect with other small pieces of puzzle because I think together we help each other out so much more. And that's my passion. I don't have a passion for lobby, right?
Yeah.
I let guys like Sacco and Adams and some of these other guys do that work. And I don't discount that work because that's fucking hard work. And that takes money and time and effort and whatnot. So you will always get the tip of the hat for me because I know what that value that brings.
Yep.
So if that's not my jam, how do I make the industry better? Well, I make the industry better by helping small and medium-sized operators connect and help each other out and be better. That's the value that I feel like I can provide the industry as a whole, right? And that would be my role if it was a big company, that'd be my role. It's like, hey, let's connect all these guys. Let's help them promote their businesses. Let's let them talk about where they're from, what they're doing. And I'm going to tell them how I do shit. And maybe you can glean off one or two things and maybe it'll help you. Like, and that's the value that but it can be both, right? It can be all the above. All the above are necessary. And so
it's funny because I'll tell you another thing that a little bit different. So in a networking group outside of the associations, there's a membership fee we pay for every month, but it's guys from different industries that support the industrial business in and around this area. So I think it's key to not only understand your industry and be in a continuous improvement learning situation, but also to know, the guys that sell the forklifts, how do they do it? Who do they talk to? Usually they talk to facility managers, which is good. We have a guy selling HVAC equipment. There's actually another guy that you're going to do a podcast with. His name's Igor. He's from overseas. He started a business. I think he follows you, Brett. I talked to him. It's called Heavy Haul Industries, I believe. I think he has 40 trucks now, Brett, and he moves all kinds of stuff all over in all 48 states. But he's the owner of the business. He'd be a really good guy to talk to. Okay. He likes your stuff. He likes the truck stuff you do. The outfit and stuff. That's not really my jam, I'll tell you that. But he's totally into that. I'll connect y'all. I think that would be a great podcast because he's a guy that came here, you know, started working as a trucker independently, and him and his brother have grown a business that honestly in this area has no limit to it. Absolutely no limit. And he's one of the most humble guys you'll ever meet in your life. You know?
I love it, man. So tell me about, before we go, tell me the future of CRC. What do you guys, I mean, what are you guys trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? How do you see your place in the industry? What's the grand plan, or what do you look forward to? Any of the above, I'm willing to listen.
CRC is just going to keep doing what it's good at. Always looking towards new technology to help improve the business, make it more efficient. I see myself in the industry as, one of the young leaders, helping people out, helping younger people. I tell everybody, you can call me anytime. We can shoot the shit. I think that there's a good opportunity. I think there's a big push you've seen for sustainability and ESG. That's becoming a huge topic in this area, especially with, BMW's here. They have a lot of European suppliers that Europe's like 20 years ahead of the US on the CSG stuff. So you're going to see a big push. How does that balance with South Carolina and people that have been here a long time? We went from a very agrarian society to the reason BMW came here was we had a massive manufacturing kind of tier 2 machinist base. And so we've evolved, right? We have BMW here. We have Michelin has, I think, 7 or 8 plants in the state. Their North American headquarters is here. We also have Boeing's here. They're in Charleston building the Dreamliner. So, CRC is going to operate in that, the business that works for us. Like I said, it's not going to be the big business, really big business, right? But doing business with all their suppliers, growing the industrial base, very important to us, but also, playing a role in recycling and sustainability in South Carolina is big for me. The guys here support that, which is good,
I love it. I love it. I think the big takeaway for me is, that as much as the consolidation that's going on, even in your area with steel mills and, big scrap companies buying out, the smaller guys, there will always be a role for the small, medium-sized operators when your focus is customer service and you provide some value to your customers via drop boxes, via, going over and above in a tough market, with exchanges. And, I think that I have a hard time believing that the big business will just squeeze out all the small business, because you've got a lot of guys and gals in our industry that are used to tough times, that grew up with tough times, that we have kind of a cockroach mentality. You can step on us 100 times and we just keep climbing, keep crawling. And that's why I love this podcast. That's why I love talking to guys like you, that are out there putting it in and every day, right? They're scratching, they're clawing, they're trying to build real businesses that bring more value than just, no knock to your buddy that's just selling insurance, right? Like,
right.
And I think that, I got a really good friend that sells insurance. But what we're providing, what we bring to the table needs to be said. It needs to be, communicated, depend on the audience. It needs to be communicated. And I thank you, man, for, sticking with me and having the patience with me to put this podcast together. And I'm happy we were able to sit down.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds good, man.
All right, man. Have a great month and go out there and make it happen.
Yes, sir. Scrap life forever, man.
Yes, sir.